It was one of those perfect modeling days. Too wet to be outside, fire in the fireplace, just the right day to put on the coffee, tune into some favorite music, 86 the clock, and settle in to see what I could do with this dragon kit. Welcome back to Scale Model Workshop. In this video, I want to share my current project and how it's helped me to reinforce what building scale models is for me. This project takes off from this terrific book, Armored Champions, The Top Tanks of World War II, written by Steve Zalaga. And in all honesty, I can't say enough good things about this book. And if you have any interest in military history, this book belongs on your shelf. The book's broken down in chapters dealing with the most significant stages in theaters of operation. At the end of each chapter, he selects the best tank from the perspective of the unit commander versus the tanker. To make his comparisons, Steve combines his extensive knowledge of hardware, along with all the other historical factors that contribute to the success of a particular tank on the battlefield at that time in World War II. In my opinion, this book presents some of the most intelligent and concise answers to that familiar question, what was the best tank of World War II? And what you see from this book is, it depends. It seemed to me that the selections of best tanks from this book would make a perfect, coherent collection of World War II armor models. And in the process, I've finally become a little more familiar with the other types that until now had only a passing interest as possible future models. When I started this project, I was thinking more in terms of the collection as a whole, and it would be better to opt for kits that provided reasonable detail and accuracy and avoid getting bogged down in prolonged individual models. Looking at the kits that I already had, I was solid with U.S. armor, but my knowledge of German and Russian armor was always about next to nothing, and the few kits that I had already collected were based on reviews and forum board advice that was focused pretty much on accuracy. Anyone familiar with Dragon armor kits knows they can be a bit over-engineered, with somewhat sketchy instructions. If you're not already familiar with the subject of the model, this combination can make construction a bit challenging. One of the top tank kits that I didn't have was the Stug 3, so I opted for a Tamiya kit. I knew the construction would be more straightforward, and I could get a feel for German armor. The kit went together really well in very little time. So easily, in fact, I thought a little detour wouldn't hurt. I decided that a Panzer III would make a nice aside to illustrate the derivation of the Stug design. I already had a Panzer III in my collection of kits, but when I opened the box, I quickly realized that maybe that wasn't such a great idea. So I decided to go with a Tamiya Panzer III kit. I was already familiar with the base kit, and the hull went together really quickly. But the turret sprue looked a bit simple, and I'm not particularly fond of two-piece barrels. I went back to the Dragon kit and compared some of the parts, and it looked like they were rendered in a little finer detail, and there was a nice one-piece barrel. I felt like it was time to pause for a few minutes and weigh my options. Go with the simplified Tamiya turret and deal with the two-piece barrel, or maybe just try the Dragon turret and sort through the instructions in various sprues. Since it was a good day to be inside, I decided to slow down a bit and give the Dragon kit a shot. I was extremely impressed at how well the parts went together, even the smallest two-part hooks. At the end of an enjoyable afternoon, I had what looked to me a very nice turret. Being in the German armor mode, I decided to move on to another top tank, the Panzer IV. Here again I already had the Dragon kit, but again I opted for a Tamiya kit. I wasn't particularly impressed. There was uncommon flash around some of the parts, and the fit wasn't always that great. It seemed like an older Tamiya kit. I took another look at the Dragon kit and remembered how well the turret went together. I decided to shelve the Tamiya kit and go with the Dragon kit. And again, I was very impressed at how well the kit went together and how much more refined the detail was rendered. It took quite a bit longer, but in the end, it was a much more enjoyable experience. Going through this process exposed me to the contrast between how many of us go about building models now versus how we might have done them when we were younger. Now we research a subject to death, search out every review and opinion available, check out dozens of other modelers' builds in an attempt to select just the right kit, and then if something isn't perfect, we agonize over the corrections or buy a bunch of aftermarket parts. When we were young, research might have been a picture in a book we got from the library. How many of us remember these books? Last time I went to the library, half the shelves were gone. We learned about the subject from a little snippet of history on the instruction sheet and the details of the model, and there wasn't a lot of angst if those details weren't right. Most of us figured out that the real deal didn't have markings with raised edges. We didn't know how other people had built the model or how long it took them. We were just happy that we got it together, and maybe the canopy on this one was still clear. There are many aspects to our hobby of building scale models. To a casual observer, it often just looks like adults who never grew up. But for a myriad of reasons, often too nebulous to put together in a coherent sentence, we spend countless hours constructing miniatures. And when you think about it, it's really quite odd. On one hand, most people would associate a hobby with some sort of relaxing activity. Yet one of the major components of scale modeling's an obsession with tiny details that most people can't see. Tiny bits that, if pointed out, will cause you to be branded as even more odd by those who question your activity in the first place. How we balance between the fun of this hobby and the obsession for detail and perfection may sometimes become a challenge. But I think if you make that element of fun the priority, it puts everything in a more constructive perspective. The last thing we want to do is allow this hobby to become another stressor in our lives. I know for myself, whenever I've allowed deadlines, obligations, or other people's opinions to creep into my hobby, the fun goes away. I rediscovered it's better to slow down, close the browser, and build the way that's fun for me. So long for now, and I'll see you next time.